morning, afternoon. I'm not sure where everybody is who has signed in so far, but welcome from URC in Bethesda, Maryland, in the United States. We're very glad that you can join us today for this webinar on paper. It's one of two webinars on paper, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're going to cover. But first, I wanted to tell you about the Global Reading Network. The Global Reading Network is funded by the United States Agency for International Development, and it's a community of practice with thousands of members worldwide, all dedicated to ensuring that every child around the world learns to read in the first primary grades of school. URC, as I mentioned, serves as the secretariat for the Global Reading Network. And as such, we offer a host of informational, professional training and sharing opportunities to all members of the network. And if you are interested in joining the network and you haven't done so, just send us a chat and we'll make sure you get added. We are experiencing a global reading crisis. UNESCO estimates that 250 million children worldwide do not have basic reading competencies by the end of grade 4. In some countries, students who have attended school for at least 5 years still have a 40% chance of being illiterate. As many as 170+ million people could be lifted out of poverty if all students, especially those in low-income countries, left school with basic reading skills. One of the major steps that would contribute is providing essential reading materials, including decodable readers, level text, and other fiction and nonfiction titles to all early grade students and classrooms. In most contexts, the development of titles and the production of books is lengthy and a costly process subject to error and corruption. One element in being able to produce and provide sufficient numbers of books for all world's primary students is the type of paper that is being used for print runs and that is being ordered by ministries, foreign assistance projects, and non-governmental organizations. This webinar will begin to introduce us to the world of paper and will help us understand how our choices about paper can improve our ability to provide every student with text to read that will help her or him become a proficient reader. This webinar is part 1 of 2 on paper, and there will be 3 others on book production, one on the production itself, one on binding, and one on distribution. So stay tuned for the announcements of the dates for all the other ones. So the second one in this series is on January 13th. Today and the one in January is being offered to all the network members by some of the most well-reputed and experienced global paper production companies. They include Burda Druck, represented by Mr. Christian Ewert, and Stora Enso, represented by Mr. Martin Gerke, and UPM, represented by Ms. Stephanie Eichener. In January, representatives from Pullman and from FCA will further expand our knowledge of paper and procurement. We hope that with the information that you get from these presentations, you will become knowledgeable and thoughtful about the way in which you procure early grade reading materials, which in turn will help greater number of children receive the books and the stories they need to be able to learn to read. I would like to turn it over now to Cynthia Renderos from URC.
Thank you, Tisma, and welcome everyone again. We want to make sure that we take care of some housekeeping issues. So if you go over to your right-hand side, you'll notice that there are 4 windows. One being the participants window, a chat window, and a question and answer. If you'll notice, if you click on the participants window on your right-hand side, you'll be able to see everyone's camera, including that of our presenters, throughout the presentation. Additionally, there is the chat window. Chat window will allow you to send us any questions, whether it's IT related. We ask that you please please forward those to the IT host. University Research Code 04 if you have general questions regarding any other issues you might be having, or myself, Cynthia Renderos, again, with any issues you might be facing at that time. To make sure that everyone is on board, we've now asked folks to please let us know what country you're joining us from to ensure that the chat function is working correctly. So I will now give a minute for us to go ahead and do that. So again, the chat function is over on your right-hand side. Great, we're starting to receive a lot of feedback. So thank you, we appreciate you for joining us. We have Colombia on the line, USA, and of course we have colleagues from other countries joining us from around the world, including Germany. Kenya. Great, thank you. Keep those coming. Additionally, we have the question and answers box, again on the right-hand side. To ensure that this function is also working, we ask that you please answer a quick question for us. Tell us a question you've always wanted to know about paper. It can be everything and anything. So take a second to go ahead and answer that question. So again, you should be able to see it over on your right-hand side, and the question and answer is, what is everything you've ever wanted to know about, or a question you've ever wanted to know about paper? Perfect. We have a couple coming in now. We'll queue those up as the presentation continues. Lastly, if you click back over to your participants window, you will see on the lower right-hand side a raise a hand portion. This section, you can raise your hand throughout the presentation to ask questions. Again, we are encouraging you to ask questions on the chat window. There will be a question and answer section at the end of every presentation, at which time you can raise your hand. We will unmute you and allow you to then go ahead and voice your question to the panelists directly. And finally, because we do want to keep this as interactive as possible on the web, we would like to now test our polling. So you will see a question that comes up. If you could go ahead and please respond to that question, we will test our polling feature. We have approximately 1 minute to test that polling, and we are starting to see some responses, so thank you for that. So there's at least 8 stragglers, so there we go, 7. If you could go ahead and answer those. We have about 10 seconds remaining on the clock. Perfect. You will now be able to see the responses to that polling question. So if you're having any issues with any of these functions, we ask you to please chat with us, let us know, and we'll try to get to you as soon as possible. With that, we thank you again for joining us, and I'd like to now introduce Christoph Jort, who is the Business Development and International Sales Associate over at Burda Druck, joining us from Germany.
Hello, and again, a warm welcome from Offenburg in the middle of the Black Forest in Germany. Hello to all our audience, all speakers, and as well to all people from URC and USAID who have worked towards this first webinar today. My name is Christian Jurt, and I'm working for Burda Druck in the field of business development for educational demands. With the great support of URC, it is my pleasure to guide you in the next 1.5 hours through this first webinar session on paper. Before I start to introduce our first speaker, I would like to give you an insight about our agenda for today and some information about us, Burda Druck, and our roles for today. As mentioned briefly by Tisna from URC, we have planned 2 sessions for the topic paper. In the last weeks, we realized that paper is such a huge and important topic that we can't put all informations which are needed into one webinar. Otherwise, this session would take 5 to 6 hours. Based on this, we have decided to split the topic paper into two different sessions. For today, our topics will be how to choose the right paper and sustainability in the field of paper. As you can see, the second session will be in the second week on January on the 13th. It will also be in Wednesday. So, coming back to today in the role of us, Burda Druck. Burda Druck is one of the largest printing companies in the world for catalogs, magazines, advertising supplements, and educational materials. Our main facilities are based in Germany, France, and India. In the last 4 years, we have printed over 100 million educational materials for different countries like India, or Ethiopia, Malawi, Mozambique, Ghana, for example. For different customers, such as World Bank, USAID, implementing institutions like RTI, and as well for the different educational publishers all over the world. Working on different proposals for educational materials like textbooks and working together with different procurement teams, we realized in a lot of cases a big knowledge gap between our customers and us as a printing company. We found out, unfortunately, we don't speak the same language. What was the issue? Within almost all requests for proposals, the specifications of requirements for educational materials, such as books, are mostly incomplete or even incorrect. Under these conditions, it is impossible to produce or procure materials for educational demands for the best value for money, and over more get the books right in time for the school start. Most RFQs and their specifications don't follow basic standards, which are absolute for book production. I'm not talking about special specifications which we as Burda Druck need to print. I'm talking about basic international standards for book printing, such as the degree of brightness of paper. There's a big difference in the world of paper between these two terms. The important role of bulk, or in other words, volume of a paper, and the huge impact of these specifications on delivery and distribution. We will discuss this deeper during our webinar session for delivery and distribution at webinar number 3. Paper production and timelines to get millions of books right on time into schools. Millions of books are arriving each year almost too late at schools, a long time after the start of the school year. Another point, what means wood-free paper? To be honest, wood-free doesn't mean the paper is made without wood. I hope everybody knows this. The important role of the size of the books and the number of inner pages, and as well environmental aspects, which should be considered by choosing the right paper. There are hundreds of terms in my mind. I could easily go on for several hours with this part. So, finally, wrong specs are leading automatically to higher production costs. Considering that 50% of the production costs are coming from paper, too much money is being lost that could be invested into more books or other important projects. I do hope that the following 2 keynotes will help us to fill a knowledge gap and will help us to speak the same language in the future. In our first keynote about how to choose the right paper, we will talk about all different available paper qualities for books. Next to wood-free uncoated paper, there are a lot of more kinds of papers available on the market. Depending on the needed material, such as textbook, readers, or supplements, it makes sense to think about other more suitable paper types, which are made faster available, as it is stock paper, or even at a more cheaper price level. Now coming to the first company and our first speaker. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Martin Gerke from Stora Enso. Stora Enso is one of the top 3 paper suppliers in the world and the largest book paper producer in Europe. The company has over 28,000 employees and operates in more than 35 countries across the world. Stora is one of the global rethinker for paper, biomaterials, wood products, and packaging to offer innovative solutions to all their customers in the field of renewable materials. Moreover, Stora Enso is a strong partner of Burda Druck and one of our main paper suppliers. In the last 4 years, based on the usual specifications for educational materials, Stora Enso and Burda Druck have developed a special textbook paper with outstanding specifications for whiteness, brightness, and bike together. I'm glad to introduce you to Mr. Martin Gerke, Vice President of the Technical Customer Service Team from Stora Enso. Martin has more than 20 years experience in the paper industry and is strongly focused on development of new customer solutions. So Martin is the right person for this first webinar session in paper. Thanks a lot, Martin, to being here for today.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Christian, for the introduction of Stora Enso and myself. I'm very proud to be part of this session here today, and I wish you an exciting time and many insights and learnings from this webinar. In the first module of today, we focus on the paper qualities, explaining a little bit the categories used, the paper terms, and we learn a little bit about the key features stakeholders like you need to clarify when choosing a certain type of paper for a specific textbook. We will start with a brief introduction about paper as such in a small video clip.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Paper. I'm 2,000 years old, and my origins are from China. I'm versatile by nature and ready to transform for many uses. For the longest time, I used to be everywhere, so people took me for granted. Actually, in the increasingly digital world, I feel I'm making more of a difference today. Retailers can't leave me out without losing sales. And what about the poor email marketers? They're struggling to get their voice heard today. But envelopes enjoy over 90% opening rates, and no WikiLeaks. They've been trying to get rid of me in the office for 20 years. Paperless office, they call it. Have you seen it yet? They should have just said, let's make it a smart office. And then we would have all understood. Distribute and print, not print and distribute. That's logical. That's why we have computers. They could have also advised us right from the start by saying, print double-sided copies when you can, and print color only when you need it. People have brains, you know. I may sound a bit bitter. I'm really not. I know I have a lot of strengths. When I need to offer relaxing offline moments, I often wear my newspaper, book, or magazine outfit. I have a lot of different ones, depending on the impression I want to make. You know, reading offline also leaves a deeper imprint in the brain of the reader. If I could only make educators understand that. By the way, I'm also great with young and old kids. They love the touch and feel experience I provide. To top it off, I have a great environmental story. I'm made of renewable materials. I'm recyclable, and I have a low carbon footprint. But I can no longer promote my strengths on my own. There will always be a need for paper, but it's tough out there. I need to focus more on solutions and services that bring value. That's why I need your help. As they say, behind the success of a paper selection, there's a great paper team. You can find one at Stora Enso Paper. Let them tell you more.
Okay, that's what we try to do now. Let's talk a little bit about paper selections and how to choose the right products. Why is that a challenge? Because we have different end-use requirements from the end user's point of view. which means the reader or the child in the school to learn. We have the educational or publishing point of view, because you have a certain message you want to get across. We have the production point of view, because it makes a difference how you manufacture the final booklet to choose the right paper for that one. And we have the environmental, sustainable perspective to take into account, which Stephanie will later on explain a little bit more in detail. We have two options how we can choose a paper quality. First one is we go by paper categories, and I will explain that a little bit. And the second section I want to talk about is a little bit talking about the actual requirements and then defining the required paper by that. Option one might be the easier one, but you have to be familiar with all these trade terms and specifications and requirements as such before choosing that one. So the choosing by actual requirements might be the more challenging solution, but it might be the better one because it might lead to exactly the right paper product for the very specific end use you're looking into. So we are tackling it from both angles. First, we start with option one and the choose by paper categories. I tried to show that a little bit in a type of graph. And here you will see on this chart on the bottom line the fiber composition, and on the y-axis you see the value of the product. Value in this case means, of course, the price of the product, the paper as such, but you have to link it to other properties like shelf life and so on. So it is a combination of things, but if you look from the bottom qualities, highest qualities, you have almost a factor 3 of paper purchasing price level. So let's start with one of these paper qualities, which in fact the only one which is linked to a certain end use, and that is newsprint. A paper which is made often from 100% recycled material, so you don't know really the origin of the fiber as such. It is a product with a very short shelf life, in general a day. You might have weekly newspapers, but not really much more than that. In the next category, we are now suddenly talking about paper grades which are more defined by the paper manufacturing process. So that's very confusing, not very helpful, but I tried to introduce at least the main abbreviations and typical trade terms used. And one is MF, which means machine finished. It's a type of improved newsprint because you have a better surface, so you get a little bit better print result. It's often made from mechanical fiber, so you just grind wood, and you have the book papers in that categories for pocket books, for soft cover and hard cover, and you have slightly better optical properties like newsprint, which means they're in general a little bit brighter as such. The next category in this typical chart is the so-called SCP paper. You might come across as a trade term. It means super colored. That means the paper is smoothened in the surface, so it's a bit more glossy than the machine finished paper, but it's as well less stiff and has less bulk, so it's a quite flimsy sheet if you want, but it's a bit shiny, so you get a bit better print result than the MF grades, but it's of course much thinner. Typical end users are magazines and catalogs, shelf life of a week to a month. So TV magazines, smaller catalogs, and so on typical. So next step to improve the paper quality is you can coat the surface. And then there's a category which is called lightweight coated. So you have a type of SC paper as a base, and you paint type of coating color on top, creating a very smooth surface. Again, it's still a very thin paper, and the main end users are really big catalogs and magazines. I think very good examples is the Time magazine or the IKEA catalog, which are produced with this type of paper. Very similar to the LWC is the MWC, and you have as well an HWC. It just means medium weight coated and high weight coated. So the difference between the lightweight coated and the other qualities is you add a second coating layer. Why are you doing that? Again, you're improving the paper surface even further, so it's less fibrous, it's even smoother, and again a very good optical properties and very bright paper in general. So that is used for high quality magazines, high quality advertising, high quality print results, but with a reasonable shelf life. So a couple of months you can keep this paper or these print products. If we move up to the wood-free coated, WFC, Christian mentioned it already. Why is a paper called wood-free coated? It's definitely still made from wood. Or you can say you can make all paper from any renewable material, but wood has a big advantage that you have the highest densities, so you need less surface to produce more fibers than when you're using any other plants. But in India, for example, sugarcane is used and many other things. Wood-free means, in fact, that you remove the yellowing part of the fibers so that the paper stays in the same optical properties. So that's the main explanation for the wood-free. The wood-free coated range, again, has a very smooth surface. It does not yellow, and it's used for very high-end quality advertising, books you want to keep for a long time. In the education sector, if you want to draw maps or you want to show stars, Milky Ways with very lots of details, then this is then a very good end use for those type of papers. And then in the value chain, really on the top end, you can say are the wood-free uncoated papers, very similar to the wood-free coated. So you have a fiber base which is yellowing free, so it's lignin free, so it stays white as it is. It does not have the coated surface, but it has more bulk and other higher properties, and that's used for books and many other end uses as such. So the highest end use, or highest amount of end use for these type of products is the copy paper. But what does it mean now for you or the choice of textbooks? As you can see in that chart, lots of those categories are suitable for a textbook. So these type of qualities, if you understand them well and you have references, you can use them, but it's not really an ideal definition to be 100% sure that you fulfill the final criteria to find the right property, because textbooks are too different. Hence, we look at the second type of choosing by actual categories. Before we are doing that, I want to like to show you a little bit how the global market from these products look like. Because again, availability might be key. If you want a certain product, but it's not produced everywhere, and it's not really the right choice either. So if you look at the newsprint MF SC grades, which are often referred to mechanical papers, global consumption and production is roughly 28 million tons. But it is very much declining on an annual level of 5%. Certain categories like newsprint are declining even further because people are moving away from obtaining their news from a newspaper more to digital print as a digital solution as such. Other qualities like the pocketbooks are staying rather stable, but in general, it's a market which is declining. If we look, clicking to the right one, if we look at the coated magazine papers, again, 14 million tons, so it's a much smaller market than already this category, so there's less availability as such. It's not produced in every country, again, and it's a declining market as such as well. If you look at the next category, the wood-free coated, the coated fine papers, often it's used as well. It has a similar size to the original category, but it's rather stable. It is produced all over in the world. Availability is rather good, and consumption is quite stable, you can say. And the wood-free uncoated, the uncoated fine paper is in fact the biggest paper looking only after graphic paper. So we exclude all the packaging and other end uses which we can do with paper, of course, or with fibers. We are only looking at the ones which are used for printing papers. But then uncoated, you look at it, it's 41 million tons, and the very big difference in this category is, as well, it is at least stable, or in some countries is growing, because that picture I'm drawing here is, of course, for a very much world perspective, but when you look by quality, by market, you have, of course, huge variations, but it gives an indications about the availability of the different products. Okay, I would like to move on then to the option 2, how to choose a paper, and that is by a requirement. So we are talking a little bit more the end use requirements as such, but again, I group them into certain paper categories. And the first one is the mechanical-based fibers, or the MF grades, and so on. Can be coated or uncoated, doesn't matter so much from your point of view, because you might look more into then what features do I need and what features are important for my type of textbook. And these papers are very good. They have a high bulk. What does it mean? They're very stiff. They have a high thickness. You can get them in lots of different shades. You don't have so much show-through, so you don't read the text on the back side when you have a quite thin paper. The print quality is quite reasonable. It's quite okay. Not so good as well is the contrast. What do you mean by contrast? It's really the difference between the substrate, the paper as such, and the print on top. And the higher the contrast, the easier it is to read, especially if you don't have the best reading conditions. Meaning when you don't have lots of light, high contrast might be very important so that you can still decipher the text even when the light conditions are not perfect. Again, strength properties are for those papers not the strong point. Of course, they fulfill their purpose. But when you look at a pocket book or a hardcover book that is read a couple of times, if it's a very astonishing story, you might read it 3 or 4 times, or library are renting it out a couple of times. But it's not used on such a big basis. And those type of fibers, they get brittle with the time. Hence, I wrote down as well, they have a quite short shelf life. Of course, you can keep those books reasonably long, but the main change is that they change because of the fiber composition, they're changing in the yellowing, which means, again, the contrast is dropping and the paper turns yellow and brittle, which might not be in the long run the right thing. But if you're looking for a textbook with quite short lead time or short shelf life, and this might be a quite good product to choose, in fact. The wood-free uncoated product range is the biggest used for educational end use. Main reasons are it has a very long shelf life, it doesn't yellow, it has this very strong contrast because you can have that paper much brighter than these mechanical grades. It has a very strong strength or stability, so it can be used by many hands. The pages can be turned very often, and it doesn't fall into pieces on a short time. Very stiff, so the pages are not flimsy and not falling out. Again, you don't have the yellowing. You have quite good bulk, which might be good for short, small pagination books. If you have lots of paginations, it might be in fact a negative thing because you don't get as much pages into the book you would like to get. The print quality is quite reasonable. The opacity is not so good, which means you can easily read the text on the other side if you choose a paper which is too thin in this category. So you have to be careful how much ink, how much text you add on both sides. Then looking at the next category, and that is the wood-free coated ones. Here you have an excellent print quality. You have such a perfect surface that you can print lots of small details. So if you need that, then this is definitely good choice. You have a very high print gloss, so it's very shiny. Books, which again adds to the value, or it feels valuable, and people treat books which look valuable often better than books who look already a little bit cheaper. It has the same long shelf life than the wood-free uncoated grades because it's the so-called wood-free paper category, so it has not these substances which can yellow. You have a very good contrast because the paper is in general very bright and white, so you don't have that yellowing at all. Strength is quite, it's not as good as a wood-free uncoated book, so again you have to think how many usages you have on those type of books. Stability, stiffness again is quite low because the surface is treated so much that it becomes a little bit flimsy or weak. But again, you have to make the right mix out of those properties, and the opacity as well is not so good, so you have to use a certain thickness to make sure you are staying on the safe side to offset that disadvantage in that category. So, quite lots of information, lots of impact. So what would be the right thing to do? Is in fact, ideally you should define the main categories, what are important for your specific textbook. Is it the bulk? Is it the strength? Is it the opacity? Is it the shelf life? Is the print quality of a critical point? The format, the size, and so on, all those things, the text quality, the picture quality, all that has an impact. And then you can start categorizing the papers and see what category fits very well. So if bulk and shelf life and strength are important, then the wood-free uncoated might be the right category. If you look at very important opacity and bulk, maybe you have to choose a paper more from the mechanical fiber side. But it's very important that you find the right balance We clean them before you make a decision of a certain paper quality. Beside the technical properties, I would say it's very important that you have other sourcing aspects into taking account, and one is definitely sustainability, and Stephanie in a couple of minutes will explain more about that. So to make sure the paper is produced in the right way, and especially that the wood is produced in the right way, that we don't take out, as paper industry, trees from the forest which are replaced, and that we don't take out trees from nature reserves in other areas which are protected, and we only use trees which are really planted for that end purpose of paper or furniture or wood products, and that they're replaced in the right way as such. But Stephanie will go a little bit more into detail onto that subject. I will come to then for my presentations, and I'm looking forward to lots of questions and comments for now. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that great overview. We are now opening up the session to questions. We do have one question that came in during the presentation by Kenneth Owl. He asked if you could speak towards we hope to answer your question. Sorry about that, give me just 1 second. How to get good quality paper at a low cost.
Very good question, and you have to define what is the important part of good quality for you, or good enough quality. If you overspecify, it will be too expensive. If you underspecify, you might get a very cheap paper, but if the book falls after half the school year into 2 halves, you might have saved a lot in the beginning, but it does not fulfill your purpose. So you have to define really what is your minimum quality requirements, and that defines, in fact, then the right paper category. And the more or the lowest you get to the bare minimum of requirements, of course, the product will be cheaper than a very overspecified with lots of features you might not need in your end use. Does that answer your question, Kenneth?
Great. Second question is, if printing budget is a concern, what is the best paper for the money for textbooks and will last the longest? So folks, you are currently unmuted to allow you to ask questions directly. If you do not have questions, we will go ahead and mute you. So all will now be muted. The third question is, which is the best type of paper for consumables? Pencils, workbooks, children write with pencils.
I suggest that we mute some of the microphones. It's very difficult to understand your question otherwise. We have lots of background, so I didn't get the beginning of your question.
Okay. The question again is, which is the best type of paper for consumables? Examples are workbooks in which children write with pencils.
When you have to, that's a very good question. When you have to write in those books with pencils or pens, you should choose a paper which does not have a coated surface, because that will repel the marks you do with the pen or with the pencil. Again, you have then 2 types of categories, which are the MF papers, which can be used and you can write on them, but they don't last that long and they're a little bit more yellow. Or you use the wood-free uncoated papers, which are mainly used for answer books, for maths and English and other languages as such.
Third question, that just came in. In a lot of international development programs, strength and shelf life are very important. What paper type, MF, WFC, or WFU, should be the most appropriate?
I would say that WFU, the wood-free uncoated papers, have a higher strength than the wood-free coated papers. But again, you have to find out what is the shelf life. Is it 3 months, 6 months? Is it 1 school year? Is it 3 school years? And then define a little bit how that is. But very important to keep in mind is that it's not only the paper which has to be strong, but it's as well the printing process or the binding process of the final book which has to be appropriate that the pages, for example, do not fall out. But the paper as such, I would say the wood-free uncoated is the most stable one, but many end uses, wood-free coated and the mechanical coated grades are used for certain school books as well. So as long as they are treated, again, it depends on age of the children, or is it for adult education, might be good enough for certain end users.
We have two more questions, one from Catherine Wimana. She asked, this presentation was very instructive and full of information. I work with Rwanda publishers focusing on children's book and paper has been a very big issue in the local publishing. Most of them opt for the lowest quality, ensure books go to the market with responsible prices. Thank you for that comment, Catherine. Another question that's coming in, what paper should be used in low light environments where there is no light in the classroom or no light at the home besides candlelight or natural lighting?
Yeah, then I would say the higher the contrast between the paper substrate and the print, the better the result. But that depends not only on the paper, but as well on the print density and the print quality and whatever, how big the size of the letters and the details of the picture. So it's a combination of having a very bright paper, but having then as well a type of print which allows more larger letters than smaller ones and more basic pictures or graphic pictures with not too much detail, so that you can decipher and read them under not so good light conditions. But the contrast is important, so the brighter the paper, the better.
Perfect. So we're going to take two more questions. We will continue to answer them throughout. Leah Shaver asks, can you give us an example? If we were talking about a 16-page or 32-page children's book, what would it cost to use these different paper qualities?
I can't say that straight away from there. Can you repeat the whole question, please, just to make sure?
Yes. Can you give us an example? If you are talking about a 16-page or a 32-page children's book, what would it cost to use these different paper qualities? So when we're talking about the W...
Yes, very good. Very general, I would say. If you start with a very low quality and you say the newsprint type or the machine finish type of product, and you say the price level for this one is, you say that as a base 100, and then you move up to a lightweight coated grade, then you would say you have the price of 200. If you move then to wood-free coated, wood-free uncoated, you could move up to a price of 300 for the same surface. You have to be very careful because paper is often sold in kilograms and not in surface. So you have to take that into account, but with my calculation, I did that already. For the same number of pages, so you have almost a factor of 3 between the lowest quality and the highest quality. But as I said, it does not help you if the lowest quality is used and after 3 months the book is falling into pieces. And you have to reprint 4 times a year, then you're at the same cost.
Ana Robledo from Colombia asks, when you say papers have a long shelf life, what is your estimate of long life? And how long can they last? 3 years?
I would say much longer. Again, it's very difficult to answer if you don't know how often a certain book is used per day or per hour or per week. I mean, if you put a book in the shelf, it lasts very long. In the wood-free uncoated, they are guaranteed for hundreds of years, in fact. And as you know, even the original Gutenberg Bible, you can still read, which was produced in 1450. It is really more about how often it is used. And I would say 3 years in most schools is reasonable for many books which are rented out for the various generations of school kids.
Great. And the final question, again from Leah Shaver, when organizations are setting out their specifications, do they have to say WFC, etc., or can they just say, we want a 3-year shelf life capable of reading in low light conditions? Great question.
I would say the second one is the better starting point, because then you can define much better what is the right product. I would say the paper categories is very dangerous to use them right from the beginning, because you might pitch already too high. If you say you need it for a certain shelf life, it is used so often per day, and it's used for these lightning conditions, then we can help, or the printer can help to define the right end use and propose different products, saying, look, these are the options can be used. and then you can show it to your end users, in fact, or make a decision yourself, looking at different options at the same time. If you say already, I need a wood-free coated, then you might lose out in other options.
And finally, do printers sometimes sell you a lower price paper, like WFU, and charge for a higher price paper, like WFC? Is it safe to say that we should pay more for a higher grade paper in order to avoid the disadvantages of short shelf life and low opacity?
Yeah, I'm not sure the first part of the questions I fully understand, because there should not be a difference. I would say the paper price market is quite transparent. And to the second part of the question, yes, there is definitely an impact of shelf life and paper price when you move up in the high qualities. But it's not that printers or others are charging more for it for certain qualities than others. They are charging what the production costs are put forward by the various paper manufacturers.
And Angelica asks, is there a certain paper that is better for photocopying?
Yes, there are specific paper grades which are ideal for photocopying, which are different to printing papers for educational books. They look when you look at them, they're quite similar, but they're produced differently because for copy paper you have a toner process. You apply the ink, which is completely different to production in offset or rotogravure. So they're all part of the wood-free coated or wood-free uncoated category, but they're different papers, and when you specify copy paper, you will get a different paper than when you specify a printing book.
Liana asks, we've recently seen a type of synthetic paper in Bangladesh, kind of slippery texture but apparently durable, not suitable for writing but maybe for printing. Is this type of paper suitable for textbooks?
Can you please repeat, just to make sure?
Sure thing. Bangladesh has recently seen synthetic paper that is kind of slippery in texture, but apparently durable. Not suitable for writing, but maybe for printing. Is this type of paper suitable for textbooks?
Yes, definitely. As long as you don't need to write on it, it is definitely possible. It sounds like it's a coated paper. And definitely there are lots of children books using this type of paper, especially when you have lots of pictures.
Okay, I believe that is all the questions for now. If you continue to have questions, please feel free to chat on our question and answer box on the right-hand corner. Oh, we have one more question in the
recycled paper.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I hand back to Christian.
What is the process? How do they white out toners of, previous ink? How desirable is it?
Christian, did you receive that question?
Recycled paper.
So
is it usable? Is it practical to use recycled paper for textbooks? What is the price relevance to first-time paper?
The market for recycled textbooks is rather small because, in fact, you have only in countries with very high population density and high paper consumption, you have, in fact, reasonable collection rates, which is North America, Central Europe, where recycled papers are produced, and in India, I think, as well. But even in China, there's not a big production of any recycled papers. It's a very small market. Yes, you can use those products. They're uncoated, coated products based on recycled fiber, but it's a very small market segment. And the disadvantage is you don't know the origin of the fibers, which can be any household mix, in fact. Meaning that in general you have yellowing fibers there as well. So the shelf life might be more limited and the strength might be more limited than papers made from fresh fibers.
Thank you.
So given the interest of time, we will hold all other questions for the next presentation. Again, we encourage you to continue to ask questions and keep the discussion lively. We'll turn it back over to Germany.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, and thank you for your help to supporting us with the questions from the chat room. So I have just one additional comment on the shelf life of books. I think we have to keep in mind there are 3 big points which everybody should keep in mind. One point is the quality of paper, of course. One point is the quality and strength of binding. And one important point which nobody should forget is where do you want to place your books? If we are talking about areas where we don't have light, where we don't have any electricity, we know the houses are not good. We know the ground is not fine and the books will lie on the floor and the books will be treated a little bit. So please keep this in mind at this point. So we heard from Martin a lot about the different kinds of paper and how to choose the right one. Thank you once again, Martin, for your keynote and your valuable input. We are coming now to the second keynote and last for today. Sustainability in the field of paper, from my point of view, an important part which we as a printing company normally not see as a requirement in RFQs for the moment. We think everybody should keep in mind that paper is one of the largest resources which is required for printing books or printing other materials. It is our responsibility to keep an eye on the materials which are required for paper making and their origin. Coming to our second company and speaker, I would like to introduce you now to Ms. Stephanie Eichiner from UPM. As Stora Enso UPM is one of the top 3 paper suppliers in the world and one of the leading producers of graphic papers for all kinds of printed goods, such as books. UPM believes in the future of print and its effective coexistence with digital media. UPM places importance on sustainable paper production, which means a combination of economic, environmental, and social factors. Also, UPM is a strong partner of Burda Druck and as well one of our main paper suppliers. Ms. Stephanie Eichiner is one of UPM's top representatives for all topics around environment and sustainability. Since the first day of studies, which started at Munich with stations at Yale University, Bogor University in Indonesia, and at Cornell University, Ithaca, New York. And furthermore, for her whole professional life, she has dealt with the environmental understandings and resource management for paper. We are proud to have Stephanie with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, first of all, to Christian for the kind introduction, and also to Martin for the good introduction on different types of paper. I fully agree with Christian when he cites my company's motto, basically, that we believe in the coexistence of paper and digital media. We believe in it so much that you won't believe it, the first smartphone I received was when I started working at a paper company. But I hope you also agree with me that paper, in the question of sustainability, easily outperforms digital media because paper is renewable. It is easily recyclable, something you cannot really say about the digital devices. It is also durable and runs without electricity. And if someone is still not convinced about this, there are certificates to give proof of all these great capabilities of paper. It is sustainable by nature, and that nature starts in the forest. A forester, like myself in a paper company, that usually leads to raised eyebrows in my native Germany. Somehow I think internationally, it is also quite natural to have a forester in a paper company because everything starts with the planting of the trees. And here you see me at an event where we show customers how it is done. But it continues with the mapping of biodiversity hotspots in the forest, also something that a forester can do. It goes on. Here you see me doing a forest certification audit, an internal audit on the actual rolls of printing paper. So to check if the recording and the documentation is done correctly, to make sure that the certified wood from the forest is going through the production chain without any amount being lost or being added. And then, of course, like today, it is always important to educate about sustainability issues in paper making. Sustainability includes the ethical supply chain, the sustainable and renewable resource, eco-labels, which sometimes are difficult to understand, but I want to offer a very simple way to think about them and to make decisions, informed decisions about them. And then I also want to introduce to you resources that paper companies like UPM or Stora Enso offer, but also external resources that, for example, NGOs like WWF or industry groups are offering to make an informed decision about the environmental and sustainable properties of the paper you're choosing. Let me start with an ethical supply chain. Obviously, it is the right thing to do to source paper that is produced responsibly and ethically. But morals are often not a convincing argument in the global marketplace. Still, it is the smart thing to look at an ethical supply chain. If you think of it from a company perspective, from an agency perspective, because only by looking at the ethical production, you can ensure that you're anticipating risks and that you're minimizing the impact on the environment and on people. And it needs a commitment to sustainable sourcing and forestry to make that happen. Because if you do not do what you see here, what can easily happen, and in fact should happen, that environmental groups like Greenpeace, as you see here, will point out wrongful behavior, and rightfully so, because it is not so hard to guard against it. Supply chain does not equal supply chain. So there are different countries in the world based on Maplecroft and Transparency International risk ranking, where there is a higher risk of purchases. Or there are different commodities that have different risks. So if you look at coal, if you look at the fiber, pulp, wood, those are commodities that have a higher risk of coming from an unethical supply chain than others. And then, of course, in the example of UPM, for example, if you have a supply chain that is very long, if you're sourcing materials from very far away, with many traders in between, then you have a higher risk. So all these are components that a company needs to take into account. But this is nothing that someone purchasing paper should have to worry about. And therefore, companies who want to prove that they are taking care of all these risks in a meaningful way can enlist in something that is called the Ethical Trade Initiative. So the Ethical Trade Initiative will firstly ensure that the raw materials are sourced responsibly, that manufacturing is done ecologically sound, and that ethical standards are kept. For that, here you see an example, companies who sign up to the Code of Conduct of the Ethical Trading Initiative sign that they will consider forced labor, freedom of association, working conditions, child labor, and many other aspects of ethical production in their day-to-day practice. There are some 80-plus companies, some big retailers like Marks & Spencer or Tesco, for example, signed up together with non-profit organizations and international trade unions. So when choosing a paper, it is sometimes not only enough to look at that specific paper grade, but at the company behind it, because there might be companies, if they're sizable enough, that have one or the other certified paper grade, but as a whole might not work sustainably. So, but on the other hand, it's not too hard to look up how sustainable companies are working. Sustainable, when you're working with a resource like wood, is also fairly straightforward to achieve if certain rules are kept. Recycled fiber, we have heard about today, is a very good way to make a smart choice, a smart and sustainable choice. As we have heard before, the global recycling rate is at 85%. In Europe, it is higher at 46%, and in the USA. And in Europe, it's even higher at 72%. So those, like Martin said, are the countries where you can easily source and produce recycled fibers. But even in those countries, the life of wood fiber is limited. So this is also something that is often not considered when thinking about paper and when thinking about recycled fiber as a good choice. The wood fiber can only be recycled 6 to 7 times, and then it is too weak to still be used in paper making and needs to be sorted out. This means that a sustainable paper cycle contains the recycling cycle, so paper is collected, de-inked, and processed into new paper, but as you always have loss along this cycle, you always need an influx of fresh fiber. And that fresh fiber needs to come from sustainable sources. Sustainable sources means that you can ensure the sustainability by using certain certifications. And you probably all are familiar with the FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, the PEFC, Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification, and SFI, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. They all basically guarantee the same thing, that there are certain standards, sustainability standards, adhered to in the forest. Further on, printing houses, paper manufacturers have to adhere to certain bookkeeping and material processing standards to make sure the material coming from the forest is kept either separate or in the same amount under certificate as the material going out to the end consumer. One thing that forest certification does not take fully into consideration is the biodiversity of the forest. But still, biodiversity is one of the most important aspects in our, when considering environmental threats. Climate change would be another, and nitrogen pollution would be another. But biodiversity loss is the one by far the furthest advanced. Still, companies can engage in biodiversity protection by signing the United Nations Business and Biodiversity Leadership Declaration, for example. Also something to keep in mind when choosing a manufacturer. One thing that's supposed to help in making the decision is the eco-labels that you can find in the marketplace. And I want to offer you a pretty straightforward way to think about them, about the way, what do eco-labels cover? And let me start with forest certification. Because forest certification always starts with the forest and the forest management practice certified to certain social, economic, and ecological standards. Then the trader or producer has to adhere to certain ways of making traceable where that wood actually comes from. And then a label can serve, especially in retail, to make sure where the resource comes from. But business to business, we also have many customers who look at a company as a whole and at the workings of a company as a whole in deciding whether they apply or will not apply a certificate. So with that, I mean, we have customers buying certified wood, but not necessarily putting a label at the end product for one reason or another. Some reasons might be as simple as if it's a very stylish product, they say that tree stem doesn't look good. Other is that often the availability is restricted, and I will show you a little bit about that later, and the price might be higher. So it's also a decision to say, I want the security that the label is offering me, but I necessarily do not want to pay the fee for the logo use on my final product. Keep in mind that forest certification is a voluntary approach, so the forest owner decides whether to certify her or his forest and which certification scheme to use. At UPM, for example, we promote the expansion of forest certification worldwide, as long as it is a credible forest certification scheme. And all of you did a poll in the beginning of the webinar, so where you clicked whether you have joined a webinar or not. So now you will get the chance to do another poll. So I want your attention in answering the following question. What percentage of the world's forests do you think are certified? Is it 10%, 30%, 50%, or 70%? You have about 1 minute now to click, and once everybody is done clicking that after 1 minute, we can see the result and discuss the result. So take a moment to find out where to make your click. Make sure you click and submit. Not sure.
We have approximately 20 seconds remaining, and so far a total of 13 have come in for 10%, 16 for 30%, and 3 for 50%, so keep those questions coming. Your time is now up.
So we should be able to see the poll momentarily.
Okay, we are loading a couple more seconds. We had final stragglers coming in towards the end. Thank you again for participating.
All right. I see all of you are well versed in the world of forestry and paper making. Because, and the next slide may seem like one answer, but it is really two. So the majority have said 30% of the world's forests, and 13 out of 33 have said 10%. We have 3 out of the 33 respondents who are saying 50%, and nobody believes it's as high as 70%. So this slide says only 10% of the world's forests are certified if you are considering all of the world's forests. If you are only considering the world's forests that are actually managed for natural resources, then you are at 30%. So both these answers, 10% and 30%, are actually correct, depending on how you view the resource base. But what you can notice here in this slide as well, that in Europe you have a rather high rate of certification. Some countries, like Finland, almost 100% certified. In North America, you have, well, not even a quarter of the forest certified, but in many other places, only a fraction of the forest certified under one forest certification scheme or the other. Here, looking at FSC or PFC. So while I often get the question, which certification scheme is the better one, the FSC or the PFC, I usually stay away from giving my vote to one or the other, because as long as we do not have all of the world's forests under at least one of them, it is vain to argue about double certification of certain forests, especially in Europe or North America, that are already covered under one scheme. So it is the extension of forest certification, and then the competition between the standards to raise the bar continuously. But what people do not, or often not, consider when they are looking at forest certification is that forest certification focuses on forest management exclusively and on the delivery of that certified material through the production chain. It does not consider any other aspect of paper production, chemical use, energy use, emissions to water and air, or waste management. So a huge part of the environmental impact that is happening in the production of the paper is not considered in the forest certification scheme. Very important thing to consider, and something that I will illustrate further. Many of you will know the German Blue Angel, which is a certificate aimed at certifying recycled papers with a content of 80% or 100% of recycling fiber. Again, it is a very good label that is taking into consideration much of the production, but still not necessarily, if you're looking at the paper side. Printing by now is a little bit different, but the paper side, energy use, emissions to water and air, waste management, not necessarily covered in a certificate like the Blue Angel. Let me introduce yet another certificate, but one or the likes of which are very important. It is the EU Eco Label, and it is a label. We often also call it the EU flower because the logo contains this little flower. It is a label that is very product group specific. So unlike for a certification that is looking at the resource, a logo like the EU Eco Label is looking at a different, at a very specific, for example, newsprint paper or printing paper, copying and graphic paper, and thinking, what are all the steps involved in producing this paper and how can this process be made in more environmentally friendly over time? So it is an eco-label that considers the sustainability of the resource, the chemical use, the reduction of energy use, the reduction of emissions and to water and air, and the reduction of waste in the process. And to illustrate this, it looks at the resource. And remember, for a certification, and so much part of certification do that too. They look at the resource. But then newer eco-labels, like the EU label, and one would be another example, Austrian eco-label, they take into consideration the whole life, the whole cycle of production. Here, another way to look at it. If you have forestry, recycling, chemicals, energy, emissions, and waste management, all important environmental performance of the paper, which certifications do actually cover all of this? So keep that in mind when you're making your choices. What is it you want to cover? What is it you want to safeguard? And in helping you making decisions, paper companies like UPM offer extensive resources, but most others will do as well to varying extents. Obviously, a code of conduct should not be missing in any company you are sourcing for. A code of conduct saying that all laws in all countries producing and doing trade in will be adhered to. Obviously, certificates should be easily found. You don't need to run around quickly to find the information that you need to look, that you need to make your decision. But then, not only are there internal resources that companies offer, but there are also external resources. For example, the WWF is offering the checked, rated, and looked up according to environmental parameters. And then some industry effort, the Publishers Group, Preps Group, or the environmental paper assessment tool, which are external resources where paper producers can submit information about their paper. That information will be validated by a third party. And what these tools help is not only say on, face value of a paper grade that you're purchasing, is it certified to one of these standards, but also are these other components, the climate performance, or the ethical performance of a company. So it is well worth not looking at the specific grades, but looking at companies that are supplying to you. Because after all, paper is really offering a unique opportunity as a sustainable media. There was, in 1913, a dissertation written in Germany about media use and the ancient Roman Empire. And the interesting finding that was made there was that the oncoming of a new means of communication never replaces an older means of communication. It only leads back the older means of communication to its strengths. So when you think of this, the oncoming of the radio has not replaced the newspaper. And the oncoming of the TV has not replaced the radio. And the oncoming of digital has not replaced any of the other media. But it makes us think, what is the unique strength of a certain media? And the strength of paper, as I said initially, it is made from a sustainable resource. It is recyclable. And as you have seen now, it is certified and you can trace its origins and its sustainability. And to that, I really encourage you.
Just a second. The internet connection doesn't work well at the moment.
Okay.
And the question also, if you could speak a little bit slower. So, okay. Perfect.
So with that, I take questions, and I hope you can hear me now. I just heard that you were not able to hear all of what I've said. But surely we will share the presentation.
Yes, so the presentation, there was just a couple of seconds where there was some buffering on our end, but for the most part, we did get the full presentation, Stephanie. Thank you again. Lots of very good information, especially given the state of our world currently and all the climate change discussions that are being held now in Paris. It's great to know that even on our end, we can have such a huge impact towards those goals. So with that, we do have a couple of questions that have started to come in. How can you do a better job of making sure paper meant for recycling actually makes it through the recycling process?
Please repeat that question again.
Sure thing. How can we do a better job of making sure paper meant for recycling actually makes it through the recycling process?
Well, for that, you would need the awareness of the consumer to actually recycle it, right? Is that question aiming at that? So you need a system in place in the municipalities to collect the paper. You need a system in place to sort the paper. And in many places that is happening because it is a very sought-after commodity right now. But then on the other hand, in Europe, you have a rate of about 72%. So still that could be higher. So still with a very refined system in place and a lot of education around recycling, awareness might not be as high as it should be to make the most of recycling.
Thank you. The next question is, what condition does paper need to be in to be recycled, i.e., grease-free or stain-free?
Well, grease-free is a good thing. The cleaner, the better, obviously. Especially in terms of like germs that are introduced in the process and will then need more cleaning in the paper facility. But yeah, just as you said, I think another important thing is often people, they rip paper apart because they think then it's easier recycled. Well, what you want in paper recycling is the fiber to stay as intact as possible. So shredding or ripping apart cardboard or paper is not the right thing to do. You should leave it as whole as possible as you enter it into the process.
The next question is there any way to know if you are getting charged the correct amount for paper? And if so, where can I find that information?
That is an especially interesting question because what the
Paper index. Paper index.
Just to help Stephanie, there are paper indices on the internet from various independent resources where you can benchmark your own paper price. You should not forget that the paper price is, of course, with or without the delivery, and if you want to deliver it to a very remote place, There's a completely different price than the ones mentioned in the benchmark.
Even though I would assume it's like with most things in the market that a benchmark is a benchmark and it is a guideline, and it depends on negotiations with your delivering partner what price you will actually receive, and also maybe on conditions, for example, longevity of a contract or things like that.
Volume.
In that same thought, there is a second question. For an international development project, what are the cost differences between SC, PEFC, SFI paper, and non-certified paper? And what are some of the cost differences between the three papers and eco-labeling paper?
So I will stay away from saying like a euro or a dollar amount in general because of the availability. FSC tends to be more expensive than the others.
Let the printer answer. Normally, Burda pays around 15 to 20 euro per ton of paper additional for certified paper.
And this is something that I always want to make everybody purchasing paper understand too. It also depends on where you are. So UPM happens to have a lot of paper mills in Germany. So when a customer in Germany is asking for FSC certified paper out of a German mill, then that is very costly, and it is in fact very costly because in Germany the majority of forest is PEFC certified, as in the neighboring countries like Czech Republic or Austria. So while these forests are managed fully sustainably, if a customer insists on a different type of certificate, that might mean shipping of resources to meet that demand, and that of course increases the price. And of course, it also increases the ecological footprint that you are having.
Leanna asks, how does the price of recycled paper compare to the price of non-recycled? Is recycling efficient?
I think it used to be that recycling was probably not as costly. However, as it's getting a more sought after commodity, that's changing, and we are experiencing shortage of recycled fiber as well in our paper mills. So not only is price a consideration, but also environmental considerations. So when you need to ship recycled fiber around Europe or around the globe, let's say, then it might actually be the more environmentally friendly way to supplement production or to lean on a local wood resource, especially fiber resources. So price is one consideration, ecological footprint the other.
How many companies outside Europe have the eco label? And this is from Singena.
The EU eco label?
Correct.
Well, not even all European paper companies do have it for their full range. So UPM has an especially large offering in EU eco label. And that also for mills that are not in Germany. For example, for the Chinese mills that UPM is running, the standards are exactly the same, and the eco-labeling is the same. But this is one of the things that I encouraged you to do in the presentation, and I hope it has come across. If you want to purchase paper, look at the companies. You know, make your own decisions, do your own thinking, as we saw in the Stora Enso video in the beginning. People have brains. They can look at a company website. They can make an informed decision based on the information there. I guess
just a quick update for those of you that are receiving the doodle.
You know, probably the colleagues from Burda Druck here would agree with your printer too to help you.
So we are having some technical difficulties on the presenter's end. We have switched it over to a lower bandwidth capability, so you'll be receiving that message on your screen. However, we do still continue with the audio portion of the question and answer sessions. Once we have the bandwidth up and running, we will go ahead and restream that video. There is another question. Do you have any, from Paul Frank, do you have any experience with sourcing printing paper in developing countries?
So the question is, yes, I'm just repeating the question. The question is if UPM has a experience with sourcing
printing paper in developing countries.
In developing countries.
They want to know where they can procure paper in developing countries.
Yes, yes, of course. Any of the companies present today are having sales offices or production in those countries, definitely.
Anna asks, how do the producers specify that it requires sustainable paper? Do you cite it on several types of certification? So again, the question is, how do the producers specify that it requires sustainable paper? And do you cite one or several types of certifications?
I think it is very similar to the specifications that you make in certain qualities that a paper should have. That best would be to your paper producer or to your printing house to specify which aspects you need to cover, be it ethical production and trade, be it sustainable forestry, or be it a full certification of the whole production like offered in the EU eco-label. Usually a combination thereof is best, so a forest certification together with a label that is covering the whole production to make sure that you have sustainable paper. Is that answering the question? For someone making books, how to communicate with their source to get sustainable paper?
We are getting a yes. Paul asks, what do you know about sourcing sustainability produced paper in developing countries? So again, what do you know about sourcing sustainable produced paper in developing countries?
I am not exactly.
So he goes on to say, I think one of the problems is that we are not buying the paper, but depend rather on the printing
provider. So anywhere in the world to sustain them, to source. Sustainable from countries like we're
Leanne asks,
having connectivity issues now. I think I'm not hearing you speak.
Our side is fine.
Stephanie, can you hear us? So folks on the line, it seems like we are having...
I'm not receiving your question.
Folks on our end, it seems we are having some technical difficulties. Please bear with us as it is an online platform. And being part of the development world, I'm sure all of you know the difficulties that can happen when we have technical issues. We're working with our IT here on our end and with Germany to get the connection back up. We do thank each and every one of you for continuing to send your questions. Please note that if your question is not necessarily answered, we will try and get them to you via the site where all the presentations will be uploaded and will be available to you via an email sent, again, with a reminder of our next webinar. So as we're waiting to get connection with Germany, we ask that you continue to send in your questions. Stephanie, are you with us now?
I have you back. I have you back. Can you hear me?
I think that way they can try to leave that meeting and come back if they get it better.
I had you back for a moment, though.
We hear you now. The next question is how much...
I hear you too.
How much ethically produced paper is available in developing countries?
You're breaking up again, unfortunately.
How much ethically produced paper is available in developing countries' contexts?
In Africa?
Yeah, so Africa would be an example of
Can you clarify? The question here comes from Christoph from Burda Druck. What is available? Does available mean can you purchase it there, or is it produced there? Because obviously it is available. You can buy it anywhere in the world. Produced, America, Africa, Asia. Oh.
South Africa?
So there's currently no specification on in the region or the country. But we do have a follow-up question that says, what kinds of training are available on the ETI? How would a small company producing paper, say in Zambia, for example, where there is no certified forest, access information about ETI? So linking those two questions, the example would now be in Zambia.
Not to use the internet, use the phone call. Phone to call.
So I think the starting point would be a webinar like this. Take the presentations that you have heard here, get in touch with the for example, ethical trade initiative, and then see whether participating in it is the suitable and right thing for you to do, because those initiatives obviously are open to anybody.
Perfect.
So it is sometimes a question of, distributing the information about the existence of these things, but that's why Burda Druck and USAID and the other partners decided to have a webinar like this, to spread the word about what's available, what resources are available.
Perfect. So in that same line of thought, a lot of our partners obviously are not the ones that are buying the paper, but depend on the printing producers to actually buy them. Since they're not actually involved with buying paper, they don't necessarily know what is available in a particular place. How can they be more responsible how can we be more responsible in print buying?
So what we have seen often is that the end customer, the agency, the publisher can make demands on the printing house, and only if these demands are coming, these demands for responsibly produced paper, will the printers move that direction. So I think there is a lot a specific publisher can do to demand the responsibly sourced and responsibly produced paper. Make it a requirement.
Yeah. Costs ought to be addressed. Of course, we all love responsibly produced paper. But how much is any of these certifications worth vis-a-vis irresponsibly produced paper? Because also the donors have cost constraints, and you may end up with half the textbooks if you make all of these demands.
What I can say, and I see that Martin might have a point here as well, is you do not pay more for a paper that is produced, well, maybe that's different to say. Cost, it really depends on the availability, or maybe I really pass this one on to Martin.
Yeah, my comment would be, what is the cost of a not responsible paper purchased? When the forest is not existing anymore in whatever country, I think you can't have any costs on that when it is replaced by a desert. So yes, there's a small difference, and Christoph made a comment how much it is. It is a little bit more expensive, but I think in the long run, it's especially for education, it's the only way forward to use responsible purchased paper.
Great.
All right, I could not have said this any better.
Sorry.
No, awesome. Let's call it teamwork.
Anna asked, where can she find more information that's available for her region, which would be South America?
Yeah, I would look at the producers. websites. I would look at the certifiers' websites. I would look at the associations, print and paper associations. You can always look, ENGOs you can look up to if you think you consider them more trustworthy than producers. You can look up WWF or Greenpeace. They have the rankings of the papers as well. They have lots of information on sustainable sourcing.
And Martin here, if you have a specific supplier in mind, you can always ask him to show his certificates. I think you can't, because they're made by independent organizations, you can always trust them when they are once produced, and that you can cross-check that they are the real ones. But it's always, I think, directly the supplier, or as Stephanie said, through the third parties' websites.
And for the Philippines?
It would be exactly the same. The response would be exactly the same.
Okay.
How about corruption?
I mean, we can always, if you need it very specific, you can always be in touch with me or with Martin afterwards, or with Christian or Christoph, to make sure you get the resources that you need. I mean, I am hired at my company to answer specifically questions like that. And if your needs are very particular, I have a worldwide network of experts to tap into. So South America or Asia Pacific might not be my area of expertise, but obviously we have the expertise in the company, as does Martin. So feel free to, shoot us an email, call us up, and we can find out whatever you need to know.
Okay. In the coming decades, funders are likely to move towards requiring responsible source paper, depending on cost implications, is the response we just received.
So was this just a comment that donors are moving in that, well, as they should, right? As they should, based on what Martin also said before, because the cost of not doing it is a cost to all of us and to our future.
Okay, great.
How about corruption? Fakery, that is. A little bit like organic vegetables. You know they're, you can find out from the DNA or something else if they're organic. How much can we trust certifications, particularly in places like Benin, which does have a printing industry? And, it would be interesting to know where they get their paper. Thanks.
Did you refer to a specific company now, or this specific country?
No, I was thinking about, let's say, we go to a country where we would like to support local printing, and it so happens, for example, Benin, for which, I'm not being specific on companies, has local printing industry. I don't know where they're getting their paper, but let us say that somewhere in Benin or in Zambia or in Cote d'Ivoire, where all of these is printing industries, they say, yes, we have certified paper, or we have sustainable paper, but we chose not to certify. How can anybody know? Do you have any sense about corruption, frankly, in this respect? About, about fakery?
There are global corruption indices, so countries are ranked by Transparency International according to the risk, and if you perceive the risk very high, or you have your particular local publisher that for some reason or another you think you don't want to trust, you can always follow up with the certifying agency and say, did they actually receive the certificate? If you say, because obviously you can be shown a piece of paper and might not be able to judge, is it a valid certificate or not? But anybody awarded such a certificate will be listed in a database, and often these databases, for example, in the forest certification, PEFC or FSC, they're publicly available. So you can enter the name of the company, you can enter the certificate number, and see whether they show up or not. And if they do not show up, then you have a means of discussing and arguing with your supplier.
We have another question that's coming in. We're wondering if there's where this information will be posted. So just again, as a general announcement to everyone, this information will be available along with the contact information for all of our presenters. If you have any specifics to ask them for the regions, they will be happy and glad to take them at that time. We do have a couple of more questions that are coming in, so we'll forward those as needed. There is a general comment. Awareness of all these details is a first step, and that's why we host webinars exactly like this. So again, to bring it back to the conversation, these are very important topics, and so we need to just stay abreast. And we do have a role to play when it comes to the sustainability of our areas. So making sure that we're aware of that and our roles and what we have to play is important and key. Another question that just came in, how can we do a better job of making sure paper meant for recycling is actually makes it through the process? I believe we answered that question earlier. At this point, I believe we have taken all of the questions that are queued up. Stephanie, we thank you again for the great presentation. We apologize again for the technical glitches we had. However, again, these presentations will be posted on our site and linked over to you as soon as the presentation is over. So we're sending it back to Christian so he can take us through the final slide.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of sustainable paper.
So also thank you from my side, from Burda, for this great keynotes which we just saw from Martin and Stephanie about these both topics. We would be now available for a couple of more questions if you want. We could take Stephanie and Martin together in front of the camera to answer some global general questions.
We do have a general question that just came. The viability of the certifications are good for how many years? Are they annually or are they biannually? And this is from Sangeta.
Martin here, just discussing with Stephanie. We are not 100% sure because it depends on the scheme. Some are only annual, you have to renew, some are 2 and 3, and some are 5 years valid.
Okay, great.
It's better to check in certified.
And is there a website where this information is available?
I think it's available with every single certification, how long they are valid, and I think when someone receives a certificate, it is stated for which period it is valid.
From your opinion, what is the recommended certification allotted time?
So we're moving around a little bit, playing, how's it called, musical chairs here. I don't know, Martin, if you want to move closer as well. So I think there are 3 things to keep in mind if you want to have responsible paper. So the one is the source. Especially for an end user, but also for a company, you need to know, is it certified? Is it from a certified resource and certified in the sense of forest certified, PSC, FSC, SFI? But then you need to consider the production, as we have said. So something a bit more far-ranging, like an EU eco-label, or an ISO-certified company is often a good indication as well. And then thirdly, as I have said, look at those global rankings that we have both shown on our presentations at the end, and feel free to look them over again once they are posted. So the carbon footprint of a company would be something to be considered, and something that responsible companies continuously reduce. So you can always look at benchmarks, at environmental management reports or at annual reports that will contain that information and will benchmark that information on previous years.
We have another question that came up. And this is from Carla. Will one of the next webinars address specifics for binding? So that is a question that we'll for now put on the table and say that we are going through the whole process of paper and the production of it. So I hope that helps to answer your question, Carla. Okay, I believe that covers all the questions that we have queued up on the chat window. Again, we thank you all for taking the time, really being interactive with us, letting us know your thoughts and opinions. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Christian.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, I'm back. Thank you very much. My last part is very tiny for today. Just saying thank you to all listeners at this point. I guess, Cynthia, I will hand over now the ball on your side back to Washington to close with a housekeeping outro. Can I say this? Like the survey which we will send afterwards, and the second webinar session for paper on 13th in January.
Being so understanding of our technical issues, we really appreciate you being with us today, and we ask that you please help us make these webinars much more interactive, exciting, and worthwhile for you to join. By taking our survey at the end of the series, you will be prompted as soon as you leave the room to answer the questions. Please allow about 2 or 3 seconds delay for the survey to pop up. It's very quick and easy. We promise we'll keep it short, but it is invaluable information for us to have. We want to give you the best experience possible. Go ahead, add your comments, add more questions. Again, we do have a follow-up webinar, so part 2, that we will be discussing and sharing with you all. Save the date for January 13th, 2016, so Happy New Year in advance to everyone. We look forward to seeing you there. We'll be sending you more information. Again, all these slides and presentations will be emailed to you as well as available on our site. Thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Have a great day, everyone.